Through you, Mr. Chair, I do see that our live streaming is up. It is 3:59, encroaching on to 4 o'clock, so whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
I guess we're ready. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Now, it will appear we have a quorum, members of the Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Pelham. This is an electronic hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present and viewing at home will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands and information has been provided on the town's Committee of Adjustment webpage. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should the application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The process is as follows. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to participate in the hearing. If you have pre-registered to speak during the public portion of the application, you will be brought into the Zoom meeting and will be unmuted. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. Please be advised, once you have finished speaking, you will be removed from the Zoom meeting room. If you are live streaming at home and wish to submit a comment during the application, you may do so by emailing clerks@pelham.ca. At the conclusion of the public portion of the meeting, these comments will be read into the record. If you submit comments after the public portion has been closed, your comments will not be considered. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for the conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this meeting. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. If you wish to be provided a copy of the decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. The Secretary Treasurer's contact information is available on the upcoming PowerPoint presentation and available on the town's website. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. This meeting is being conducted by Zoom webinar and is also being live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. You may wish to put your view on gallery view by clicking the top right corner from the speaker view. We ask that you be mindful of the background noise for the duration of the meeting. Committee members are asked to mute their microphones until you are asked to speak. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak and vote by raising your hand. Please note that attendees who have registered will remain in the waiting room via telephone or electronically until their application of interest is brought to the committee. Those participating online via Zoom will be asked by the chair to raise their virtual hand when they wish to speak. On a computer, you can do this by clicking Participants in the bottom center of the screen and then by clicking Raise Hand. On a mobile device, you can tap Raise Hand in the bottom left corner. You will then be called upon to speak and your microphone will be unmuted by staff. If you are participating by phone, you will be unmuted by staff when the agenda item you have been registered for is being heard. Applications, agents, and attendees are advised. They are free to leave the webinar once a decision has been made. The following panel members are in attendance. Myself, I am Don Cook. Bernie Law is a member, and also Sandra Marsh. Nancy Bizzotto It's the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham, and she also will be assisting us. Assistant Secretary Treasurer is Holly Wilford. Holly will be basically running the meeting and reading most of the things into the record. We also have Curtis Thompson, a planner with our planning department. I believe we also have our engineering. Let me see here. Oh, there's Mr. Thompson. And I have to scoot over here somewhere and see if from our, hang on. My mouse isn't working today, so here we go. We also have Tolga Aiden from our Public Works Department in attendance. That is the staff. Like I say, I call this meeting to order. We're going to do pecuniary interest. Does any member of this panel have pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications to be considered at this meeting? Mr. Law.
Through the chair, I do not.
Mrs. Marsh?
Through the chair, I do not.
And I also do have no pecuniary interest. Assistant Secretary Treasurer Wilford, have there been any requests for adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there have not.
Okay, the first application in front of us today is application A27, 2020. It is a minor variance application. The property requesting minor variance is a property located at 571 Roland Road. Assistant Secretary, would you please read comments from the planning report?
Thank you. Committee of Adjustment hearing. All Town of Pelham in-person Committee of Adjustment hearings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all Committee of Adjustment hearings electronically via Zoom. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Participants are reminded, ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you'll be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participant microphones and video cameras will remain off until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphones will be muted. Once voting on an item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit comments live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note, comments must be received during the public portion of this meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given an opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments, concerns at one time. Application for minor variance. File A27/2020P, 571 Roland Road. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the north side of Roland Road, lying east of Cream Street and known locally as 571 Roland Road in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 7.4D, minimum front yard, seeking 8.7 meters, whereas 13 meters is required to both recognize the existing legal non-complying dwelling and to permit a new covered porch. To date, the following comments have been received. MPCA, no objections. Niagara Region, no objections. Building Department, building permits are required. Public Works Department, no comments. No public comments were received at the time of writing this report. Is the variance minor in nature? The reduction of the minimum front yard setback is minor overall because it will help to improve the Roland Road streetscape by enhancing the traditional architectural design of the early 20th century brick dwelling. The proposed covered porch is an appropriate development for a dwelling which currently lacks a practical front porch and amenity area. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The reduction of the minimum front yard setback is desirable because it will allow for improved living arrangements and usage of the existing legal non-complying dwelling with a covered front amenity area. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The variance maintains the general purpose and intent of the official plan because it does not compromise the rural character of the neighborhood, nor does it prevent the ability for the site from being adequately serviced with a private septic system. The rural community character will be maintained, the use is permitted, and no adverse impacts are anticipated regarding water quality, hydrology, and stormwater runoff. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The variance maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw because the requested setback reduction recognizes the existing illegal non-complying dwelling and allows for logical and appropriate extension of the dwelling while still maintaining adequate setbacks for the traveled roadway and usable land for the private sewage system. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development principles dealing with the appropriate rural residential development and streetscape design. The proposed minor variance should not negatively impact the surrounding land uses with regards to land use incompatibility, privacy, and stormwater runoff. The Planning Department's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application A27/2020P be approved, subject to building permits being required. Committee of Adjustment hearing. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fawn Hill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, and jbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're just stopping our screen sharing, and we do have the applicant in the meeting with you.
Hello, Mr. Kita. Do you have anything to add to the what has been read into the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, I do not.
Are there any questions members wish to ask Mr. Kita before?
Through you, Mr. Chair, would you like me to see if the public have sent in any emails?
Yes, please.
Thank you. To date, we have no pre-registered members of the public, and it is 4:10. And I'm just checking our clerks at pelham.ca, and I see that there are no emails received, so you can close the public portion of the meeting and continue on with committee input.
Thank you. We'll close the public portion of the meeting. And are there any questions of Mr. Kita for members of the committee? Seeing none, are we in a position to render a decision? Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mrs. Marsh.
I'm prepared to make a motion that the minor variance be granted for the following reasons. That the variance is minor in nature, as it will improve the appearance of the road and dwelling design. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the land as it creates a covered front porch amenity area. The application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. No objections were received from commenting agencies or abutting property owners, and that the Committee of Adjustment has considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation for this application meets the Planning Act test for minor variance. One condition with this application would be that the building permits are required.
Do I have a seconder?
I would certainly second that motion.
All in favor? Carried. Our next application is application B9 2020 1431 Station Street. Ms. Wilford, could you please read excerpts from the planning report?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you. Application for consent, file B9/2020P, 1431 Station Street. The subject parcel shown as Part 2 on the attached sketch is an interior parcel of land situated 61 meters east of Station Street, lying south of Highway 20 East in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to partial mortgage discharge and to convey 2,850.3 meters square of land, Part 2, to merge with the abutting property to the south, Parts 3 to 4, being 1419 Station Street. 1,269.6 meters square of land, Part 1, is to be retained for continued residential use of a single detached dwelling known as 1431 Station Street. Note, the boundary adjustment is intended to facilitate rear yard land consolidation for a future draft plan of subdivision in East Fonthill. To date, the following comments have been received. Corporate Services, see conditions. Building Department, no comments. Public Works Department, see conditions. MPCA, no objections. No public comments were received at the time of writing this report. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. The severance will be better positioned for the lands for the future subdivision development in a more efficient manner, which will not negatively affect the development ability of the balance of the lands. The proposed severance should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. The remnant lands will continue as a single detached residential use until such time as the landowner explores alternative development options. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application number B9/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant merge Part 2 with Parts 3 to 4. Ensure municipal taxes owing on 1431 Station Street be paid in full to the town to the satisfaction of the treasurer. Confirm that no existing utilities currently cross the proposed lot lines. Should any existing services cross the proposed boundaries, then the applicant shall be responsible for relocating or removing and removal costs. Provide a written acknowledgement that the owner will be responsible for payment of the front-ending contribution payable to the town of Pelham for the East Fonthill Storm Water Management System oversizing. Provide the Secretary-Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the Certificate of Consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, to submit to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of the consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary-Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham, Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, NJ Bizzato at pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Ms. Wilford. Mr. Kaiser, do you wish to speak to the committee on this particular application? We can't hear you, Mr. Kaiser.
How's that?
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're good?
Now we're better.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is the third time, so I think I'm getting better at it each time, and I have thank staff for their comments. And really, I'm prepared to answer any questions, but I think it's straightforward. It is a land assembly. We did one a few months ago in terms of 1427 Station Street. The committee asked at that time when they thought a draft plan might be coming forward. And I was a little bit uncertain, but I can say with more certainty, I would think you'll see a draft plan on these lands in 2021 for sure. There's still 2 more pieces to the north that I'm working on.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Ms. Wilford, there are no pre-registered participants. Have we had any comments submitted by email while we're considering this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just checking right now. I can confirm that is 4:17, and we have not received any emails, and there are no pre-registered members of the public. So if you wish, you can close the public portion and start with committee input.
I believe we can close the public portion of the meeting. Members of the committee, are there any questions for Mr. Kaiser on this application?
Mr. Kaiser, I walk by this property most days in our walks over to the new town center, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to expand the property. I think you'll do an excellent job for the town of Pelham on these lands.
So you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Law, thank you very much.
Mrs. Marsh, any questions for Mr. Kaiser?
Through the chair, no questions or comments. Thank you.
I also have no questions because this, Mr. Kaiser, as you said, this is part of a land assembly, and I'm sure that the plan of subdivision will be forthcoming. With that being said, are we ready to render a decision on this particular application?
Yes.
Do I have a mover or seconder?
Yes, I am ready to move on with file B9 2020P.
Thank you.
Application for consent. 1431 Station Street, Pelham, to convey Part 2 to be added to Part 3 and 4 of the sketch and partial discharge of mortgage is hereby granted. The above decision is subject to the following conditions to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Confirm no utilities cross the proposed lot line, written acknowledgement that the owner is responsible for payment of front-ending contribution for stormwater system oversizing. To the satisfaction of the treasurer, pay all outstanding taxes. To the satisfaction of the secretary treasurer, Part 2 is to merge with Part 3 and 4 as solicitor's written undertaking is required. Number 2, that the secretary treasurer be provided with a reasonable legal description, and B, a copy of the deposited reference plan. Number 3, that the final certification fee of $395 be provided. This decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to the policies of the Town of Pelham official plan, regional policy plan, and provincial policy statement, and complies with the town's zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard to the provisions of sections 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act, RSO as amended. No objections to this proposal were received, and commenting agencies or neighboring property owners. The Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions and finds that subject to the conditions of the provisional consent, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan and the Niagara Region official plan and the town official plan.
Thank you, Mr. Law. Do I have a seconder?
Through the chair, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
In favor.
In favor. Granted.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the members of staff, for their input.
Hope we're getting a little better at this, Stephen.
It's flowing along nicely. Hopefully there's 2 more, but we'll definitely be back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next application. Hang on a second here, people. I got to gather up my information. Ms. Wilford, Assistant Secretary to the Committee of Adjustment, would you please
Thank you.
read comments from or parts of the planning report? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Application for consent, file B10/2020P, 1012 Cream Street. The subject parcel shown as Part 2 on the attached sketch has 126.2 0.24 meters of frontage on the southwest corner of Cream Street and Welland Road in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to partial discharge mortgage and to convey 2.75 hectares of land, Part 2, to merge with the abutting property to the west, Part 3, 626 Welland Road, for continued residential use. 3.534 hectares of land, Part 1, will be retained for continued use of agricultural building. At this time, no future use has been proposed on Part 2. To date, the following comments have been received. MPCA, no objections. Niagara Region, future development and site alterations requiring Planning Act applications will require the completion of archaeological assessment and environmental impact study, no objections. Building Department, no comments. Public Works, C conditions. Hydro 1, no comments. No public comments were received at the time of writing the report. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals regarding the enablement of appropriate economic development on land suitable to do so by disposing of land that contains very different policy and land use permissions. Furthermore, the proposed consent avoids harm to any key natural heritage features by ensuring those ecologically sensitive features remain wholly intact by avoiding further lot fragmentation. The proposed boundary adjustment does not include any more non-agricultural development, such as residential dwellings, than what was previously existed within the agriculturally designated and zoned lands, Part 1. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with provincial policy statement and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. It is noted that future residential development on Parts 2 and 3 would require additional Planning Act development applications and approvals. Planning staff recommend that application number B10/2020P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant merge Part 2 with Part 3, obtain zoning approval on Part 1 for Section 7.2A minimum lot frontage, Section 7.2B minimum lot area, and Section 7.2E minimum side yard to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for both parts demonstrating that drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts adjacent properties and that all drainage will be contained within their respective lots to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works or designate. Confirm that no existing utilities cross the proposed lot line. In the event that services do cross, the applicant shall be responsible for the cost and responsibility of their relocation and or removal. Ensure that the Secretary Treasurer is provided with sufficient evidence indicating that the conveyance of a minimum 0.1 meter square parcel of land from Part 3 on the consent sketch be deeded to the town of Pelham. This transfer shall be completed to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works in order to facilitate the boundary adjustment proposal in this application. Said lands shall be conveyed free and clear of any mortgages, liens, or encumbrances. All costs associated with the conveyance are the responsibility of the applicant. Provide the Secretary Treasurer with legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the Secretary Treasurer with a registerable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use of the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $3.95 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of the consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Nancy Bizzato, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, LOS 1E0, njbizzato@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do believe we have the agent in the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Wilford. Mr. Haiku, do you wish to add anything with reference to this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would. I've taken an opportunity to review the report, generally speaking, in concurrence with all the dialogue and things written in that report. Just to provide you a brief overview, one of the things that is ongoing within East Fenwick is the secondary plan process that town staff initiated back in 2017, 2018. Since that time, I've been representing a small group of developers on the north side of Welland Road. We've been going through a process to organize those development lands, which has led us to this application. There is the intention of moving forward with the stormwater management pond on this part in the future as part of that secondary plan process. Ultimately, those details are all subject to that secondary plan process and future Planning Act applications that would deal with site-specific details regarding that. This application does not propose to make any physical changes to the property. We're just playing with some lot lines that are specific to the urban boundary. So basically severing off the part that's outside of the urban boundary and retaining the part that's inside the urban boundary. One of my clients that is part of that small development group is the brother of the owner of the current lands. And we've been going through quite a process to secure this existing proposal, and there are some sensitive purchase and sale agreements that are related to them. Specific to that, and in regard to one of the conditions of approval, specifically the second condition to obtain zoning approvals on part one, that's something that whether it was an oversight on my end is certainly going to have an impact on our ability to close the properties within the timeline of the purchase and sale agreement that's been drafted. So one of the things that I would respectfully request of this committee is to adjust that condition to allow us to provide a legal undertaking to complete those works. At this point in time, we really don't have an issue with doing the minor variance or zoning process required to bring those remnant lands into conformance with the zoning bylaw. But quite frankly, the situation that I'm in with the existing landowner and the negotiations that have gone on really don't afford us the opportunity of doing that within a 3 to 6 month process, and ultimately would result in a purchase and sale agreement falling apart and a significant deposit on that being lost. So unfortunately, I've got to request that at this time. I'm not sure that something you'd be agreeable to, but perhaps the Secretary Treasurer or planning staff could comment on whether or not something like that would be acceptable. I'm just trying to, having gotten a report late last week, come up with a solution for how to deal with that. So I'm definitely open to discussing it further, but I just wanted to try and deal with that at this time instead of having to, let's say, come back at a different time to deal with that. But otherwise, we're good with the conditions, the rest of the conditions. So that's it for my comments. Thank you, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Haiku. Ms. Wilford, I understand there have been no pre-registered participants wishing to speak on this matter. So could you please check to see if anybody has?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will check our email at clerks@pelham.ca. I do see that it is 4:31 and we have not received any emails. And as you've indicated, we have no pre-registered members of the public. So if you wish to close the public portion and get into committee input, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilford. Members of the committee, do we have any questions to Mr. Haiku or anyone with regard to this application? Yes, Ms. Marsh.
Through the chair, I do have two questions. Both are directed to staff. First to Nancy, just wondering in regards to Mr. Haikup's request for the undertaking, if that undertaking is permitted, is there usually a timeline that that is kind of assigned to that? Is there is it 6 months or 9 months? We're just looking for some guidance as to whether or not that would be something that would be appropriate. And the second question actually goes to staff. It's regarding one of the suggested conditions, being that part 3 on the sketch dedicate a 0.1 meters square of lands to the town of Pelham for road widening. Is that actually across the frontage of part 3, or is that a 1 by 1 meter square for road widening? Just some clarification on that requirement.
I'll direct both questions to the Secretary Treasurer and Mrs. Bizzato.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The dedication to the town of Pelham would be along the frontage of the parcel that it's to be merged with. That's to ensure that it is no longer the whole of a lot, and that would facilitate the merger to occur. Now, with regard to the request from Mr. Highcoop, I do have some concerns with regard to this. I'd like to hear from Mr. Thompson on this, but once the certificate is issued for the consented parcel to merge, we really don't have any mechanism to ensure that the conditions are complied with. So I'd like to hear from Mr. Thompson on his take on that request. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
The problem with the written undertaking as an alternative to the zoning condition is that once the certificate's issued, the lot, it's kind of out of the town's hand at that point, and the lawyer would register it, and affecting the purchase and sale agreements, but that would literally have the effect of creating an illegal parcel. So the town can't create illegal parcels. There's zoning issues with it, with part 1. So yeah.
So it may be an option for the applicant to go back to the purchaser and ask for an extension to the offer.
Mr. Highcoop.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's we have an expiration date of December 6th with the existing owner of 1012 Cream Street. I guess it just was unfortunate it wasn't flagged earlier, and I'm trying to navigate a way through this. I mean, perhaps, and I'm just thinking about this out loud, would it be acceptable to have an application submitted prior to, instead of the actual completion of the zoning? Would that be a possibility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the submission of an application doesn't guarantee an approval, and it doesn't get us through the appeal period. So we always ask for final approval, and what final approval means is that it does get approval either through the minor variance or a zoning amendment process, but also successfully makes it through that appeal period just to the LPAT. That's how we know that it is brought into conformity and thereby legal.
Mr. Highcoop, from what I have heard, I have no difficulty granting your conveyance with the conditions that are currently stated. This is your problem. I think we can only, as part of this committee, being for the town of Pelham, only carry on conveyances that meet the requirements of the town zoning bylaw. I believe that is the way that we should proceed. Are there any other questions? I finally understood what's going on with the 1 square foot or 1 square meter dedication. I understand that it is required because the existing lot, I guess part 3 was created by severance many years ago. And basically that's a plan of subdivision. So we're changing the size of part 3 so that part 2 could actually be joined to it. And that is, I also understand the reason for the dedication of the road widening to the town of Pelham. Are there any other questions of the committee to members of staff? Are there
I
any?
have a question.
Yes, Mr. Law.
Was Curtis talking?
With this change, would it be required that we would have an amendment to this application?
I'm going to ask Mrs. Pizzato, because she is the Secretary Treasurer, and she's the most knowledgeable member of staff with related to what the Committee of Adjustment can and cannot do. I don't think we can amend this application and satisfy the conditions, that the zoning conditions, by the sounds of what I've heard thus far. Mrs. Pizzato, am I more or less correct on this one?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have advertised to all commenting agencies and to property owners as required under the Planning Act for the proposal before you today, and to make changes to that application at a hearing is not proper procedure at all. We don't know what changes those, what implications those changes might have, particularly to commenting agencies, or what impacts that might have. So that would not be an acceptable approach.
Mrs. Donna, in cases past, we've seen conveyances go through, and at the same time, we've seen the number of variances being requested by the applicant. And I guess in this particular case, we're being asked to approve a consent without having regard for the variances that may be required, which are listed somewhere in one of the reports. I think I don't know where to go with this one. I'm to the point where we can grant it with the conditions that are stated in the report, and he has a certain period of time, and it's up to him to deal with the condition of sale. I'm sorry.
Understood.
Any other comments? Are members of the committee ready to render a decision on this application? If so, can I have a mover and a seconder?
I will second.
Coordinator hand is up first, so it's on.
Through the chair, I can make the motion for the application to be, for consent to be granted to convey part 2 to be added to part 3 on the sketch, and for a partial discharge of mortgage, subject to the following conditions: to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, that lot grading and drainage plans for both parts are accepted, confirm no utilities cross the proposed property line, part 3 on the sketch to dedicate a 0.1 meter square to the town of Pelham for road widening, and to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development, that all the necessary zoning approvals for part 1 are obtained, to the satisfaction of the Secretary Treasurer, that part 2 is to merge with part 3 as solicitor's written undertaking as required, and that the Secretary Treasurer be provided with a registerable legal description, a copy of the deposited reference plan, and the final certification fee of $395 be provided. This decision is based on the following reasons: that the application conforms to the policies of the Town of Pelham Official Plan, Regional Policy Plan, and Provincial Policy Statement, and complies with the town zoning bylaws. The decision is rendered having regard to the provisions of sections 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act as amended. No objections to this proposal were received from commenting agencies or neighboring property owners, and that the Committee of Adjustment considered all written and oral submissions and finds that that subject to the conditions of provisional consent, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I second that motion. Thank you.
Are all in favor? Carried. Mr. Haiku? That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on with the agenda. We have a number of minutes for approval. Now, let me gather up my papers here. Minutes for approval. Minutes of the Committee of Adjustment of February 25, 2020. Can I have a mover to accept the minutes as prepared? I will make that motion that we accept the minutes as written for the meetings of February 25th, March the 3rd, July 21, and August 11. I will move that. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Law. All in favor? Carried. We now have the minutes of the August 17th meetings, the general meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. Can I have a mover and a seconder for approval and adoption of those minutes? Mrs. Marsh moves. Seconder, Mr. Law, all in favor? Carried. The next item for the agenda is adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Committee of Adjustment, Town of Pelham, for November the 3rd, 2020? Mrs. Marsh moves that the committee adjourn. Mr. Law seconds. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. And I guess we'll see you in December, for some of us.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. I'm just turning off the live stream and turning off the recording. The live stream is still showing. I turned it off.